What if the Soviet Union's deadliest dive bomber was born from a prison engineer's survival instinct? The Petlyakov Pe-2 wasn't just a weapon of war, it was a paradox. Conceived in Stalin's gulags, built by captive minds, and flown by crews who knew every mission might be their last. Welcome to Historical Digs, where today we unearth the story of the Petlyakov Pe-2, a plane that lifted a dictator's nightmare into the skies and left the Germans scrambling. The prisoner who redrew the sky. In the winter of 1938, Vladimir Petlyakov, a man whose designs had once broken altitude records, woke to the clang of NKVD boots at his door. His crime? Existing during Stalin's Great Purge, a time when Soviet aviation's brightest minds vanished into unmarked graves. Petlyakov was tossed into Moscow's Butyrka prison, sentenced to death for sabotage by a tribunal that lasted 8 minutes. But Stalin's regime had a perverse pragmatism. Why waste a genius when he could build weapons in chains? Petlyakov was transferred to TSKB-29, a Sharaska, a secret prison laboratory where purged engineers designed war machines under the threat of execution. Here, the NKVD traded survival for innovation. Meet quotas, eat, fail, face the wall. Guards patrolled with dogs and stopwatches, timing bathroom breaks. Petlyakov's task? Create a high-altitude fighter, the Vi-100, to intercept German bombers. The catch? His team had no wind tunnels, no advanced alloys, and no margin for error. The Vi-100 was a pressurized marvel, its wings skinned with duralium and scavenged from factory floors. But in June 1941, Germany invaded, and Stalin's demands shifted overnight. High-altitude fighters were irrelevant. The Red Army needed dive bombers to smash panzer columns. Petlyakov's team, malnourished and sleep-deprived, retrofitted the Vi-100 in a matter of weeks. They stripped the pressurization system, welded bomb racks to the fuselage, and reinforced the wings with standard steel alloys. The Pe-2 was born, a 41.3 feet long Predator with a maximum takeoff weight of 18,700 pounds, capable of 330 miles per hour. The Pe-2's first prototype flew in December 1939, with mass production accelerating after Germany's invasion in 1941. Factories eventually produced over 11,000 Pe-2's during the war. Prisoners worked 18-hour shifts, their hands bleeding onto rivet guns. The plane's blueprints, stained with sweat and fear, bore no designer's name, only a serial number. Before we dig deeper into the Pe-2's savage story, hit that like button and subscribe to Historical Digs. Your support helps us unearth the lost stories of history's most ingenious war machines. Petlyakov's reward for success? A pardon and a new sentence. Keep building or return to the gulag. His creation would become the third most produced Soviet bomber of the war, but the man himself remained a ghost, his name erased from press releases. The Pe-2 was a paradox, a cutting-edge weapon born from barbed wire, its very existence proof that tyranny could harness genius but never truly own it. The Soviet paradox: speed versus survival. While the Luftwaffe dismissed Soviet bombers as lumbering relics, the Pe-2 redefined the Eastern Front skies. Its twin Klimov VK-105PF engines, 1,100 horsepower each, propelled it to 330 miles per hour. It could dive at angles up to 70 degrees, a near-vertical plummet that turned gravity into a weapon. Pilots would release up to 3,500 pounds of bombs at 5,000 feet, then yank back on controls with both hands to avoid slamming into the earth. But speed came with a Faustian bargain. The Pe-2's wings, reinforced with prison camp steel, weighed it down. Its control surfaces required Herculean force. Pilots likened flying it to punching through a brick wall with your bare fists. The cockpit, unheated and unpressurized, frosted over at altitude. Navigators often dealt with frosted instruments, sometimes using improvised tools. And then there were the fuel tanks, unguarded, sloshing beneath the navigator's seat. A single 20mm round could turn the cabin into an inferno. The Pe-2 saw early action in 1941, striking key German targets as production ramped up. But triumph masked flaws. Its narrow-track landing gear collapsed on rough airstrips, shearing off wings. The bomb release mechanism jammed mid-dive, forcing crews to manually kick ordnance loose, and its rear-mounted machine gun? A joke. Pe-2 gunners often criticized the rear machine gun's limited firepower, comparing it to ineffective small arms. Firing it felt like throwing peas at a tank. Yet the Pe-2 adapted. By 1942, the Pe-2FT, Frontovoy Trebowanie or Frontline Demand variant, added a dorsal turret and rudimentary armor. Engineers tweaked the wing flaps to ease landings, though pilots still prayed to St. Nikolai, patron of brake pedals. At the Battle of Kursk, Pe-2s flew hundreds of sorties in a week, dropping fragmentation bombs that shredded Tiger tank formations. But survival rates plummeted. Pe-2 crews faced extreme risks, with many lost to enemy fire and mechanical failures. The Pe-2 was a machine of contradictions, faster than a fighter, yet fragile as glass, revolutionary, yet built by slave labor. It mirrored the Soviet war effort itself, a desperate, brutal fusion of ingenuity and expendability. The women who defied gravity. The sky didn't care if you were a man or a woman. It tried to kill everyone equally. But for the women of the 587th Bomber Aviation Regiment, later renamed the 125th Guards, the Pe-2 wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. While Soviet propaganda celebrated the night witches in their creaky biplanes, these women flew into the teeth of daylight defenses, daring the Luftwaffe to underestimate them. Their commander, Major Marina Raskova, the Russian Amelia Earhart, handpicked them. She recruited factory workers, students, even a ballet dancer, but all shared one trait. They'd survived Stalin's purges, famines, or the siege of Leningrad. Fear was relative. Training was brutal. Men sneered that women couldn't handle the Pe-2's violent stall characteristics or its 3G pullouts from dives. The women retaliated by drilling until their hands blistered. They learned to yank the Pe-2's 12-meter wings level after a dive using sheer body weight, thighs pressed against the stick like pistons. The 125th baptism by fire came in 1942. Multiple daily sorties were common during critical battles like Stalingrad. They struck German artillery positions across the Volga. Luftwaffe pilots, initially baffled by the Pe-2's speed, adapted fast. They'd wait above cloud cover, then pounce as the women emerged. In one documented engagement, pilot Raisa Aronova's crew survived a harrowing attack by German fighters. 2 bombers spiraled down in flames. Aronova's navigator, Nina Raspopova, shoved her pilot's head down as cannon fire shredded their cockpit. Raspopova reportedly urged Aronova to fly at treetop level to evade fire. They skimmed the Volga River at 10 meters, waves licking the belly, and lived. Landing was its own nightmare. The Pe-2's narrow landing gear, spaced just 4 meters apart, made ground loops inevitable on muddy fields. Some pilots, like Klavdia Fomicheva, devised improvised techniques to manage the Pe-2's treacherous landing gear. The 125th Guards Bomber Aviation Regiment flew hundreds of missions, with exact totals debated by historians. They also suffered significant losses, though, again, exact numbers remain debated. However, their Pe-2s had incinerated 17 bridges, 94 artillery batteries, and a German command post disguised as a church. When male generals tried to ground them post-war, female crews like navigator Galina Dzunkovskaya's fiercely defended their right to keep flying post-war. The Pe-2 didn't care who flew it, only that it flew it ruthlessly. A legacy forged in fire and ice. The Pe-2 died as it lived, violently, unceremoniously, and in service to a regime that viewed it as disposable. Over 5,000 Pe-2s were lost in combat or accidents during the war. Some vanished into forests after engine failures. Others cartwheeled into craters when novice pilots misjudged dive angles. But for every Pe-2 lost, a factory in Kazan or Irkutsk spat out 2 more, assembled by teenagers and gulag prisoners working under flickering lamps. Its tactical impact was undeniable. At Kursk, Pe-2s dropped RS-82 rockets into panzer formations, melting steel and flesh alike. Over the Kuban, they loitered for hours, directing Soviet artillery via radio, a primitive drone. But the Pe-2's true legacy lay in its ability to terrify. German infantry dubbed it Der Schwarze Teufel, the Black Devil, for its habit of diving through overcast skies, bombs whistling, only to vanish before a flak could retaliate. Yet survival was a myth. The Pe-2's Achilles heel was its fuel system. Tanks lined the fuselage like explosive ribs. A single 20mm hit could turn the cockpit into a blowtorch. Bailing out required navigating a floor hatch blocked by the navigator's table while plummeting at 373 miles per hour. Many crews faced horrific deaths when fuel tanks ignited, with escape hatches often jammed during dives. Petlyakov's death in 1942 foreshadowed his creation's fate. Testing a new variant, his Pe-2 stalled on approach, plunging into a forest. Investigators found his body still trapped to the seat, his unfinished work reflecting his relentless focus on improvement. The state buried him quietly, airbrushed his face from photos, and ordered factories to keep building. By May 1945, the Pe-2 was obsolete. The jet age loomed. But in a twisted irony, captured Pe-2s outlived their designers. Finland used captured Pe-2s briefly in 1944 to 1945, primarily for reconnaissance. North Korea used outdated Pe-2s in the Korean War, but they were ineffective against advanced US aircraft. And in a Moscow junkyard, a rusting Pe-2 became a playground for orphans, children who'd never know the men and women who had once clawed at its controls, rewriting history from a prison-born cockpit. The Pe-2 wasn't just a plane. It was a metaphor, a machine forged in tyranny and abandoned the moment peace allowed idealism to creep back in. But for 4 brutal years, it was exactly what the USSR needed, a weapon that mirrored its soul. What do you think? Was the Pe-2 a marvel of ingenuity or a death trap with wings? Let us know your take in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to join us on the next historical dig. Until then, remember, history is full of hidden gems if you know where to dig.